Hello friends, welcome to Oceanic Economics. We come with a new topic in this series, the Greatest Economist. In this video, we discuss about Robert Solow. He was the awarded of the Nobel Memorial Prize in Economic Science in 1987. He was the first economist to develop a growth model with the different vintage of capital. Robert Solow died his at home in Lexington in USA on 21st December 2023 at age 99. He leading the approach in the whole life as a play as important role in economic policy making. This our session we honor to his contribution in economy. Its help to him work demonstrated the power of bringing mathematics to bear on the important economic debates and the simplifying the analysis of the focusing on the small number variable at the time. Robert Solow was born in the Brooklyn in New York into a Jewish family on August 23, 1924. The oldest of the three children, he regarded his parents as being very intelligent despite their not being able to attain the college due to the necessity to work. He well he was the well educated in the neighborhood public school and excellent academically early in life. In September 1940, Solow went to the Harvard College with the scholarship at the age of 16. At Harvard College, his first study were in the sociology and anthropology as well as the elementary economics. In 1941, Solow left the university and joined the US Army. Because he was fluent in the German, the army put his on the task force whose the primary purpose was to interpret, and send to back German message to the base. He served briefly in the North Africa and Sicily in the late in the Italy until he was discharged in August 1945. Shortly after the returning, he is proceeded to marry his girlfriend Barbara Lewis, who he had been dating for 6 months. Robert Solow returned to the Harvard in the 1945 and studied under the Vasily Leontief as the Leontief's research assistant as they produced the first set of the capital coefficient for the input-output model. Then they became interested in the statistic and the probability model. From 1949 to 1950, he spent the fellowship year at the Columbia University to study statistics more intensively. During that year, he also worked on the PhD thesis and the exploratory attempt to the model change in the size of distribution of the wages income using the interacting Markov processes for the employment and unemployment and wage rates. In 1949, he just before the going to off to Columbia, he was offered and accepted an assistant professorship in economics at MIT College. He taught the courses in statistics and econometric. Robert Solow interested gradually changed the macroeconomics for the almost 40 years. Solow and Paul Samuelson worked together on the many landmarks theories. Solow also held several government positions, including the senior economics for the Council of Economic Advisor, time period is 1961 to 1962, and the member of the President Commission of Income Maintenance, time period 1968 to 1970. His study focused mainly in the field of the employment and growth policies and the theory of capital. In 1961, he won the American Economic Association John Bates Clark Award, giving the best economics under the age 40. In 1979, he served as the president at the association. In 1987, he won the Nobel Prize. His analysis of economic growth and 1999 he received the National Medal of Science. In 2011 he received honorary degree in Doctor of Science from Tufts University. Solow was the founder of the Cournot Foundation and the Cournot Center. After the death of his colleague Franco Modigliani, Solo accepted the appointment as the new chairman of the ISEO Institute, at the Italian non-profit cultural association with the organized the international conference and the summer school. He was a founding the trustee of the Economic for the Peace and Security. Robert Solow received BA in 1947, MA 1949, and PhD 1951. From Harvard University, he began teaching the economics as the MIT in 1949, became a professor of economics there in 1958, and professor emeritus in 1995. In the 1950s, Solow developed the mathematical model how the various factors can contribute to sustain national income growth. Contrary to traditional economic thinking, he showed that the advantage in the rate of technological process do more to boost economic growth than the capital accumulation and labor increase. In his 1957 article, Technical Changes and the Aggregate Production Function, Solow observed that about half of economic growth cannot be accounted for by increasing in capital and labor. He attributed this unaccounted for the portion, now called the Solow residual, to the technological innovation. From the 1960s on, the Solow study the help pursued the governments to the channel fund into the technological research and the development to economic growth. Solow's model of the economic growth, often known as the Solow-Swan neoclassical growth model, as the model was independently discovered by the T.W. Swan and published in the Economic Record in 1956, allowed the determination of the economic growth to be separate into the increase in input, means labor and capital, and the technological progress. The reason these models are called exogenous growth model in the saving rates is taken exogenously given. Subsequent work derived the saving behavior from the intertemporal utility maximization framework. Using his model, Solow in 1957 calculated about the 4/5 of the growth in the US output capital. This idea behind the Solow's vintage capital growth model is a new capital is more valuable than the old vintage capital because the new capital is produced through know the technology. His first is that the capital must be a defined entity because of the all the resources of the earth are indeed limited. Within the conform a solo model, this no technology is assumed to the constantly improving. Consequently, the product of the technology are expected to the more productive as well as more valuable. This idea lay dormant for some time, perhaps because Dale Jorgensen in 1966 argued that it was obviously equivalent with the bodies of technological progress as they advanced earlier in Solow's 1957 model. It was successfully advised in the subsequent research by the Henry Greenwood, who argued that the secular decline in capital goods prices could his use measure embodies technological progress. Robert Solow's initial work in 1950s, many more sophisticated models of the economic growth have been proposed, leading to the varying conclusions about the causes of the economic growth. Rather than assuming the Solow did that the people save at the given constant rate, subsequent work apply the consumer optimization framework to derive the saving behavior endogenously, allowing the saving rate to vary at a different point in time, depending on the income flow. In the 1980s, effort have the focus on the role of technological progress in the economy, leading to the development of the endogenous growth theory, now we know as the new growth theory. Today, economists use the Solow's source of growth accounting to estimate the separate effect on the economic growth of technological changes, capital, and labor. To know more about the Robert Solow, he was American economist. He is born in 23 August 1924 in USA. Death 21st December 2023, age 99 in USA. Field macroeconomics. School of Thoughts Neo-Keynesian economics. Contribution exogenous growth model. Awarded John Baird Clark Medal in 1961. Nobel Memorial Prize in Economic Science in 1987. National Medal of Science in 1999. Presidential Medal of Freedom is 2014. His notable work in the published as a book Growth Theory in 1917 and the almost practical step toward the sustainability in 1992. Next, Inflation, Unemployment and Monetary Policy in published 1998. Next, Work and Welfare in 1998. Next, Monopolistic Competition and the Macroeconomics Theory in 1998. Next, Price Expectations and the Behavior of the Price Level in 1969. Learning from Learning by the Doing is a lesson for the economic growth is published 1997. Next, Structural Reform and Economic Policy is published in 2004. And last, The Story of the Social Experiment and the Some Reflections in 1980s. Professor Robert Solow strategy is a say about the was to pick out the one thing of the special interest and simplify the role of the everything else. The goal was to understand the completely the role of the little piece of the puzzle. This strategy is inquiry come to the know as the building toy models. In analyzing the economic growth, he signaled out the technological progress as the society to the translate the input of the capital and the labor into output of the goal and service as the independent from the other key variable including the population growth and return on capital. He divides as a graph to the two curve. One capture is simplifying the assumption of that the population growth and technological knowledge rise at the constant rate over time. The second on the capture in his all important assumption that the economic impact on the adding the more and more capital get weaker and weaker. Adding the capital to a economy drive up to total output, but is the additional dollop of the capital derive of the output by the less than the previous dollop did. Put the two curve on the same graph and the powerful theory of the growth emerge. Professor Solow showed that the higher saving and investment would indeed make the individual riches on the average level of income per person would rise, but the added saving and investment will not affect the economy long-term rate of growth. The impact of the additional saving on the permanent growth rate peters out in the way that, under the Professor Solow assumption that the impact of the population and technological knowledge do not. Solow Growth Model propounded is a book contribution to the theory of economic growth in 1956 and empirical follow of the technological changes and the aggregate production function is published in 1957. Made his reputation while he was his early 30s and the lead due to the course to the Clark Medal and the Nobel Memorial Prize in Economic Science. Now we discuss on Solow's model of growth. Professor Robert Solow made his model of alternative to Horror-Domer model of growth. It ensures steady growth is a long-run period without any pitfalls. Professor Solow assumed the Harrod-Domer models was based on some unrealistic assumption like fixed factor proportions constant capital output ratio. Solow has dropped this assumption while the formulating is a model of the long-run growth model. Professor Solow showed that by the introducing the factor influencing economic growth, Harrod-Domer models can be rationalized and instability can be reduced to some extent. He has shown that if the technological coefficient of the production are assumed to be a variable, the capital-labor ratio may be adjust itself the equilibrium ratio in the course of time. In Horodomer model of the steady growth in economic system attain to knife-edge balance of equilibrium in the growth in the long run period. This balance is established as a result of the pull and counter pull exerted by the natural growth rate, which depend on the increase in labor force in the absence of technological changes, and the warranted growth rate, which depend on the saving and investment habits of the household and firm. However, the key of parameter of the Solow model is the substitutability between the capital and labor. Professor Solow demonstrate is the model that this the fundamental opposition of the warranted and natural rates turn out in the end of the flow from the crucial assumption that the production take place under the condition of the fixed proportions. The knife-edge balance established under the Herodian steady growth path can destroy by the slight change in the K parameters. Professor Solow retained the assumption of the constant rate of the reproduction and constant saving ratio, etc., and showed that the substitutability between the capital and labor can bring the equality between the warranted growth rate and natural growth rate and the economy move to equilibrium path of the growth. In other words, according to the Professor Solow, delicate the balance between the growth rate of warranted and the natural growth rate depend upon the crucial assumption of the fixed proportion in production. The knife-edge equilibrium between the warranted growth rate and natural growth rate will disappear if this assumption is removed. Solow has a provide solution to the twin problem of the disequilibrium between the warranted growth rate and natural growth rate and the instability of the capitalist system. In short, Professor Solow has tried to build a model of economic growth by removing the basic assumption of the fixed proportion of the Harrod-Domer model. By removing this assumption, according to Professor Solow, Herodian path of the steady growth can be freed from the instability. In this way, this model admit the possibility of the factor substitution. Professor Solow, for the explain attain the long run growth, let us assume that the capital and labor both increase, but capital increase is faster than the labor, so that the capital labor ratio is high. As the capital labor ratio increase, the output per worker decline and the result national income fall. The saving of the community decline and the turn the investment and capital also decrease. The process of decline continues till the growth of capital become equal to the growth rate of labor. Consequently, capital and labor ratio, the capital output ratio remain constant, and this ratio is popular known as the equilibrium ratio. Professor Solow has assumed technological coefficient of the production to be a variable, so that the capital-labor ratio may adjust itself to equilibrium ratio. If the capital-labor ratio is larger than the equilibrium ratio, then that of the growth of capital and output capital will be lesser than the labor force. At some time, the two ratio will be equal to each other. In other words, this is the steady growth according to Professor Solow. As there is the steady growth, there is a tendency of the equilibrium path. It must be noted here the capital labor ratio may be either higher or lower. Like other economics, Professor Solow also considered that the most important features of the underdeveloping country is the dual economy. This economy consists of the two sector capital sector or industrial sector and the labor sector are in agriculture sector. In industrial sector, the rate of accumulation of the capital is more than the rate of absorption of the labor. With the help of variable technological coefficient, many employment opportunities can be created. In agriculture sector, real wages and the productivity per worker is low. To achieve sustained growth, the capital labor ratio must be high and the underdeveloped economics must follow Professor Solow to attain the steady growth. This model also exhibits the possibility of the multiple equilibrium position. The position of the unstable equilibrium will arise when the rate of growth is not equal to the capital labor ratio. There are other two stable equilibrium points with the higher capital labor ratio and the other with the low capital labor ratio. If the growth process starts with the high capital labor ratio, then the development variable will move in the forward direction with the faster speed and entire system is will grow with the high rate of growth. On the other hand, if the growth process starts with low capital labor ratio, then the development variable will move in forward direction with the lesser speed. To conclude the discussion, it's said that the high capital labor ratio or capital intensive is very beneficial for the development and the growth of the capital sector, and the other country low capital labor ratio is the labor intensive technique is beneficial for the growth of the labor sector. In nutshell, we can conclude the discussion of the validity of the Solos model in that there the certain element which could be gratefully utilized for the analyzing the problem of the underdevelopment. The phenomenon of the technological dualism which is commonly prevalent of these economies can be better explained in the terms of Solo model. Solo model is basically embedded in the different setting. Yet this the concept of technological coefficient provide the element, elegant and the simple theoretical apparatus to the solve the problem of underdevelopment. Unlike Herodian model, Solo model also does not apply to development problem of the underdeveloping countries. Most of the underdeveloping countries are either in the pre-take off condition, and this model does not analyze any policy formulation to meet the problem of underdeveloping countries. But certain elements from the Solo model are the still valid and can be used to chalk out of the problem of the underdeveloping countries. The remarkable features of the Solo model is that they provide the deep insight into the nature and types of the expansion experienced by the two sectors of the underdeveloping countries. Solo growth model is unique and the splendid contribution to the economic growth theory. It established the stability of the steady-state growth throughout the very simple and elementary adjustment mechanism. Certainly, the analysis of the definitely in improvement over the Harrod-Ober model as the schedules success to the demonstration in the stability of the balance equilibrium growth by the implying the neoclassical ideas. In fact, solo growth model mark as the break the thoughts in the history of economic growth. Solo model analyzes the show how the growth in the capital stock as also in the labor force and the advance in technology interact in the economy and how these the three factors affect the nation's total output of the goods and service. The supply of and the demand for the goods play an important role, perhaps the central role in the solo model of the growth. The reason is that from the supply of and the demand for the goods can determine how much output is produced at any given time, as also the pattern of the allocation of these output among the various uses. The steady state is significant for the important reason. When the economy reach the steady state, it will stay there. This means that regardless of the level of capital with the which of the economy begins, it ends up with the steady state level of the capital. So the steady state represented the long run equilibrium of this the economy. This point requires the little effort. In the solo model, there is a direct relationship between the saving and the growth rate, but the relation hold only the short run. This means that is the increase in the saving rate lead to the faster economic growth only temporary until the economy reach the new steady state. If the economy is able to maintain high saving rate, it also succeed in the maintaining a large capital stock and the higher level of output. Professor Robert Solow death his home is Lexington in USA on 21st December 2023 at age 99. He is no more with us. But Robert Solow research, especially series of the paper in 1950s and 1960s, helped demonstrate the fundamental level how the modern economics growth occurred, and his work show the technological advantage broadly defined are the responsible for the bulk of the modern economic growth, more than the simple population growth or capital expansion. This insight opened up the whole new series of this series research questions within the academic and influence the policymaker in the many countries. Kind information for you related to all videos in this series you will find in description box and playlist. In this video we cover all the related subject in this topic. If any question you have, please ask me in description box. If you want to more videos like that, please share, like, comments, and subscribe to our channel for the more explore new topics. Stay tuned with the Oceanic Economics. See you in next video. So thank you.